The end goal of marriage was procreation, and the goal of procreation was to produce male heirs who could become soldiers to defend the city-state and take part in its political maintenance. Pregnancy and childbirth were seen in the classical era of ancient Greece, as both a biological imperative for the propagation of the human species as well as a social and political reason. As a result, it was expected of women to begin having children as soon as they had finished puberty, in accordance with moral, statutory, and social obligations. The frequency of intimate activity between married spouses was governed by law. Welcome back to History Rediscovered. In this episode, we discuss the horrific truth about pregnancy in ancient Greece. Unfortunately, the ancient Greeks had a very limited grasp of the female body. They believed that since women's bodies were more porous than men's, they absorbed more moisture, which they later transformed into blood and let out during menstruation. Women's bodies needed the dry heat of a man's seed since they were soft and damp from inactivity. According to women in the ancient world, these absorbent bodies frequently held blood to the point of discomfort, and delivery was the most well-known method of widening the blood vessels and easing menstrual agony. The uterus was also viewed by the ancient Greeks as a free-floating, nearly sentient object that was prone to wander through the body and cause health issues, a condition known as hysteria. The only effective methods to prevent a roving womb from assaulting other organs were to weigh it down with a kid, or to moisten it with a man's seed. Pregnancy tests and delivering process. Pregnancy tests involve examination of the blood vessels over the chest, and making mixtures to be drunk. In the former, the woman lies down, and her chest area, both arms and shoulders, are smeared with new oil. Early in the morning she is to be examined, and if her blood vessels look fresh and good, none being collapsed, that is, sunken, bearing children will occur. If the vessels are green and dark, she will bear children late. If a woman was given milk from one who had already borne a male child, and the milk was mixed with melon puree, if it made the woman sick, she was pregnant. Women delivered their babies kneeling, or sitting on their heels, or on a delivery seat. This was indicated even shown in the birth hieroglyphic. Often, hot water was placed under the seat, so that the vapors would ease delivery. Delivery sayings were repeated, such as one that asked Amun to make the heart of the deliverer strong, and keep alive the one that is coming. If a sickly baby was thought likely to die, its chances were assessed by the strength of its cries and its facial expression. A child that cries, "Hi," will live, but one that cries, "B," will die. If the child made a sound like the creaking of the pine trees, or turned his face downward, he would die. Where there was still doubt, the infant was for 3 days put on a diet of milk containing a ground fragment of its placenta. If it did not vomit, it would survive. How not to have a baby in ancient Greece. Having too many children was a problem in and of itself, despite the moral and societal pressure on women to procreate. An excessive number of sons would result in an uneven distribution of the inheritance. Every daughter is required to pay a dowry, which can quite expensive. Because of this, contraception and abortion were not regarded as sinful in ancient Greece, and even while there isn't any physical proof that they were in use, the fact that families were often small shows they were. The use of herbal remedies as contraceptives and abortifacients is extensively covered in the writings of the Greek physician, Cyranus of Ephesus. The majority of these plants were used as pessaries, which were implanted into the female body, with the main objective of preventing seed from entering the uterus. Nonetheless, others were consumed orally, such as silphium, which was so well-liked that it was overproduced to the point of extinction. According to the mythological tale in which Persephone eats pomegranate and is forced to spend the winter in the underworld, causing infertility on Earth, pomegranate seeds were also believed to impede pregnancy. Even in modest quantities, many of the herbs used as contraceptives, including pennyroyal, were toxic and increased the already extremely high rate of pregnancy-related mortality in ancient Greece. The fact that many of these herbs were used by women on their own initiative, and that doctors often only got engaged in cases of difficulties didn't help. In ancient Greece, having children was a risky proposition. The majority of the time, midwives handled the actual delivery of the baby, doctors were only consulted in case of issues. Yet, several of the remedies for those issues were troublesome because of a lack of anatomical knowledge. The uterus was often thought of by the Greeks as merely a place where the baby could be housed rather than as a strong muscle that could force the baby out. As a result, in order to break up a delayed delivery, the mother would frequently be violently shaken. Contrarily, midwives typically required the laboring woman to sit on a birthing stool or a hard bed during the delivery process. They would then assist the mother with controlled breathing, akin to modern Lamaze techniques, warm towels applied to the abdomen, potent and calming medicines to hasten birth, such as myrrh, and other methods to ensure the mother's comfort. Following birth, the midwife would identify the gender of the infant, cut the umbilical cord, and assess the infant's viability. Unfortunately, there was a high rate of infant and maternal mortality in the ancient world. Many mothers passed away from exhaustion, hemorrhage, or eclampsia, which causes seizures due to high blood pressure. A lady may expect to live for roughly 35 years on average at this time. Unwanted newborns were exposed at the father's option in isolated locations, a practice that is disturbingly widespread and has an adverse effect on infant mortality. For female infants whose fathers refused to provide dowries, this was particularly typical. Childbirth in ancient Greece, the religious side. Not all maternal birthing aids were pharmaceutical. With gods for every element of life, including birthing, the ancient Greeks were a devout people. According to women in antiquity, the goddesses Hera and Artemis were revered as special guardians of women, and they, together with Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, were frequently invoked in the hopes of a quick and healthy delivery, or in remembrance of one. Clothing items were a frequent offering to these goddesses. Although those have vanished over the centuries, the metallic pins and fasteners that would have accompanied them may be seen all over the archaeological record. These pins were connected to the idea that a woman releasing her belt after childbirth symbolized the opening of the womb. A startling 84% of the different belt fasteners discovered among Greek artifacts were devoted to female goddesses. After the delivery, the mother and the child rested for 40 days. Out of fear about infant mortality, the kid would not be officially shown to anybody outside of the family until 10 days and 40 days had passed. During this ceremonial presentation ceremony, a ritual purification for mother and infant appeared to involve the sacrifice of a dog. These ceremonies were followed by a big feast of celebration, which, according to the archaeological evidence, most certainly featured cakes, demonstrating the long association between birthdays and cakes. Dying to avoid being a woman. Even young ladies back then thought that a life of domestic slavery and pregnancy was horrible. One day, womanhood would just appear. According to the Museum of Menstruation and Women's Health, getting your period was seen as a sign that an ancient Greek girl was a woman and ready for marriage, because she could now have the man's children. The average Athens girl got married between the ages of 12 and 14, according to rites of passage in ancient Greece, literature, religion, society. Males, on the other hand, typically postponed marriage until their 30s. Gross, in other terms. What results is horrifying when you consider that the females didn't got to pick their husband and that they were treated like slaves in the bedroom. Girls around the menstrual age committed suicide at an astonishing rate, usually by strangling themselves with their own garments because the terror of this unsettling circumstance was so intense. Even those who didn't frequently became so stressed out that they developed the sickness of maidens, a disease. Shivering, fever, hallucinations, homicidal and suicidal frenzies, agony, vomiting, paranoia, and a sense of suffocation were among the symptoms. Male doctors at the time attributed it to their uterus wandering, which meant it was moving about inside of them, according to cutting-edge medical theory at the time. It's just unfortunate that the prescribed treatment was marriage and a rapid pregnancy. Do you think the ancient Greeks were right with their attitude towards pregnancy? Tell us what you think in the comments section.